Hello, John.
Hello, Oliver.
Today we're going to talk about the lack of vocations in the church. From 2002 to 2012, there was a drop of 13% in Ireland of priests. So we're going to discuss that today.
Yes. Well, it's quite evident going to Holy Mass in Ireland at the present time. A lot of the priests are elderly, and some of them can't retire now because there's such a shortage. So it's evident that there's a drop. Percentage wise, it says that, but really it's more serious. The number of vocations in the priesthood has dropped. There's only a small number not fit to replace in the parishes where there are priests at the present time. And if it continues like that, there'll be no mass celebrated in quite a few churches because there won't be enough priests.
Okay. So vocations all over the world have dropped. It's not just in Ireland.
Well, you see, Ireland always had it down the ages. It had more priests than there was parishes for them in this country. So a lot of them, thousands of them, went to the missions abroad. In Africa, America, which was regarded as a mission field, and England was regarded as a mission field. A lot of them went there, and in various other countries. The Philippines, well, that's a Catholic country, but still there were the shortage of priests there that went there. So, and then there was missionary societies that they also sent priests to the mission. So, the Irish planted the seed of the Catholic faith in African countries, Indian countries, and the US. And in those countries now there are a great number of vocations exceeding the requirements in their countries, and hence we have now people that were brought to the faith by Irish missioners and now coming to Ireland and saying Mass in various parishes. Indeed, the parish priest in the church where my wife died, he's been transferred, and it's an African priest that's going to replace him in that rural village.
Okay. The other thing I suppose to look at as well is that in years gone by, there would have been bigger families in Ireland. So you might have had, say, 10 or 12 children in your average family, and 2 or 3 of those might become nuns and priests.
Correct.
So there's none of that anymore.
On the subject of we had larger Catholic families years ago, and also attendance at Holy Mass. There was usually a parish priest and 2 or 3 curates in every parish. So Mass was celebrated a few times a day on a Sunday. There was no such thing as a vigil Mass on a Saturday. So all those Masses were well attended, and children were expected to go to 10 o'clock Mass, which they did, and be up near the front of the church. And so churches were packed for all the Masses, and oftentimes people had to stand at the side. So people attended Mass. The Rosary was promoted to be said in the home, and it was in a lot of homes. And there was pictures of the Sacred Heart in nearly every home, and there was often pictures then of statues of saints. So the whole ethos and emphasis was on the practice of one's religion. The people that didn't go to Mass or practice were few and far between. It was considered a very bad thing to do. The main thing was to try and save your soul. That was emphasised. So you had it in the home, you had it in the church, you had good sermons. The priest went up to the pulpit so as he could be seen and heard. I don't believe they had microphones, but they certainly could be heard. Also, in the schools, in the national schools, religion was taught, the Catholic religion, and there was schools for Protestants, and they were taught their religion, but they were in a minority. So religion was taught in Catholic schools because not every family might have been passing on the faith to their children, but certainly was passed on in the schools, and the whole culture was towards that. So we had plenty of vocations in the priesthood, and of course there was no such thing as a priest or a nun not wearing the clerical garb. Now, unfortunately, after Vatican II, One of the bad effects of that was that a lot of priests then and nuns were able to stop wearing the clerical garb. And that's what they proceeded to do, and only wear them maybe for if they were official business or something. So I think that was one factor that might have affected the vocations. The small families then subsequently would have been a factor. And then latterly, in the last number of years, the constant attacks by the media on the church and the over concentration on abuse of children that they claim accord. It was a minority, but you swear it was a majority, the emphasis that the media have placed on all this. And that also would be small families, and attacks on the Catholic Church would also affect vocations. So there's three things involved here: the small families, the lack of the wearing of the clerical garb by priests and nuns, and sometimes the lack of a clear message from the bishops and the priests about the benefits of practicing the Catholic faith, and the spiritual benefits to be derived, and the joy and happiness that to be derived from it. That no matter what else you seek in life, whether it's money or success in business or success in careers or this, that or the other, you'll never get the same happiness from it or the same contentment as you do practicing your Catholic faith.
What about
the one true faith?
Parents have different expectations of their children nowadays. In the past, you'd become a doctor, you'd become a priest, you'd become a guard. That's changed now. There's quite a lot of other occupations.
Well, you see, there's the emphasis on the world, the flesh and the devil, if you like, to the exclusion of the practice of the Catholic faith and the seeking of spiritual development of yourself and your family. Parents have definitely neglected their duty in this regard nowadays. They're not passing on the faith to their children because you don't see enough of them at Mass, although they make their first Holy Communion and confirmation. And instead of going and in a spiritual way on those important dates, it seems to be an occasion for drinking and debauchery of one kind or another by the parents. A lot of parents now, I believe, don't even know the Our Father and Hail Mary and Glory be to the Father, or the practice of spiritual development of themselves, and then pass it on to their children. They're not passing on the faith to their children, and the schools are not teaching the Catholic faith the way they used to. And now this government that we have, and maybe previous governments, are trying to deny the children the religious education that they might get if they're not getting it in the home, in the schools, and having a secular agenda and teaching all sorts of views in civil society that are not part of the Catholic faith and are definitely against the Catholic faith. So children are at a fierce disadvantage nowadays. So hence there's a lack of vocations, because it has to be practiced in the home. The home is supposed to be little churches. And even in my time, I don't think it was practiced to the same extent. We definitely said a rosary, but not consistently. And the parents didn't, you made sure you went to Mass and confession and that kind of thing, which you did. That was another thing that's fallen away. A lot of parishes now don't have confession on a regular basis for those that want to go to confession. It's by a request. And when the big parishes that have confession only have it for a short period, an hour at the most, sometimes a half an hour, sometimes before Mass for a short period, but it's not sufficient for a person to make a proper confession and confess their sins, because with the short period that they have, and people going maybe to confession in the bigger towns, well then if you're too long in, people mightn't even go to confession because they get impatient. So there is a need for more law confessions in Catholic churches, and it should be the duty of the priest to have confession, and also the duty of the bishops to make sure that they have it. The bishops appear to me to have taken a vow of silence. So I haven't heard much of their comments and their emphasising the duty of Catholics, what way to vote during the recent referendums for same-sex marriage, although they called it marriage equality, and the abortion referendum, although they called it the removal of the 8th Amendment, and didn't say one word about abortion, but that's what the people voted for. So people need guidance when they're gone astray, and they've gone astray.
We could do with a few Fulton Sheens around the place.
Well, that was a famous priest, and then later bishop, and later archbishop, which was he was given an honorary title. But he was a marvellous broadcaster in the US in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and on radio and then on television, and he had millions of viewers and was responsible for thousands of conversions because he spoke the message truthfully, but did it in such a way that it made sense to agnostic people and atheists.
And what was his full name again?
Bishop and then Archbishop Fulton John Sheen. He was from a place called El Paso in Illinois, not Texas. There's an El Paso in Illinois, and when he died, he was entombed in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. Of course, that cathedral, that famous cathedral, founded by Irish immigrants, to their eternal credit because they practiced the Catholic faith. He was entombed there because he's now the Venerable. He's heading on to be a saint, hopefully, because he was a great man. But his family now, because the Archdiocese of New York was not promoting his cause for sainthood, so he's been reinterred back in his hometown in El Paso, and so his sainthood should go abroad, because Cardinal Svenman, when he was Cardinal Archbishop of New York, had a difference with Bishop Fulton John Sheen, and it went as far as the Vatican, and the Pope came down on Father and Bishop Fulton John Sheen's side, and the Cardinal bore enmity towards Bishop Fulton John Sheen and caused a lot of trouble. So one has to be very careful, even in ecclesiastical business. When somebody is doing a good job, let them get on with it and stop trying to interfere with them, no matter who you are.
What do you think of the following? I'm going to read you out the following ideas that might increase the vocations in the church. So the first one is recruit more seminarians.
Recruit more seminarians. Well, you can't recruit more seminarians unless you're unless the faith has been passed on to the people that might be seminarians. You're wasting your time recruiting them, because they have to have a vocation first of all, because it's going to be a very rewarding life, a very satisfying life. They can devote their energies to spreading the gospel and evangelizing. In other words, not sitting and just marking time. The priesthood, in its full meaning, is supposed to go out and evangelize and visit people where they're at in their homes and try and get them to mend their ways and seek a return to the practice of the Catholic faith and to pass it on to their children. That's not been addressed properly at the present time by the priests in our country, in Ireland. It's not been addressed by the bishops that I know of, because I attend Mass and all the rest of it, and I go to the ordinary local church in Oldcastle, St. Bridget's, and I also go to at times to the Old Rite, celebrated in Latin, where the priest faces the altar, and it's in Latin, which was known as the universal language of the church. So all that was done away with, or rather not done away with, it was not put into practice, and though bishops are obliged to put it into practice in parishes which they haven't done.
Okay. What about encouraging more immigrant priests?
Well, you see, we have a lot of them now in the country, because if we didn't have them, the Mass would not be celebrated. There's some parishes now in parts of the country where Mass is not celebrated. The lay people are having a prayer meeting, and occasionally a priest that might be on holidays or be able to attend can say Mass maybe once a month or something like that. And this is in Ireland, where we had surplus priests not that long ago in my lifetime. Until the priests that we have at the present time go out to the families that have lapsed from the practice of the Catholic faith, because according to statistics we're supposed to have over 80% that claim to be Catholics, but that's not you don't see that number attending Holy Mass, and that's their duty, because your first duty is to try and save your soul. Well, you won't save it if you don't go to Mass and say prayers and try to seek a spiritual your spiritual life, and try to develop that, because you won't if you don't go to Mass and say prayers. You won't, and as a matter of fact you're leaving yourself wide open, maybe not going to confession, and yet going to Mass maybe sometimes to an anniversary, the only time you might go, or Christmas, and then going to Holy Communion when you haven't been even at confession. So there's a lot of problems in the Catholic Church that is obvious to anyone that kind of tries to practice it as best they can. And so it behoves priests and the bishops to acknowledge that fact and then to try to deal with it. And that's the only way you're going to get seminarians. If you stand up for it and fight for it, and not let the media and the people that is calling the shots, the small minority, let them calling the shots, and stand up for your Catholic faith in the marketplace where it counts. Why are the bishops so silent about criticising the coverage of RTE even for the Pope's visit?
Okay, we'll come on to that later.
Yeah.
What about ordain more married former Anglican clergy?
Well, they've done that in the UK. Quite a few of those Anglican clergy have come into the Catholic faith because they were practicing a form of Catholic faith, and then when the Anglican Protestant Church in Britain started ordaining women priests, and that, well, a lot of the traditional type of Anglican didn't support that, and so when Pope Benedict XVI was in charge there, he made it possible for them to come through a certain system about Walsingham or something in England, so as they could then do some further study and be practicing practice as Catholic priests even though they're married. So that there's the only exception. The reason priests are single and not married, and they call it celibate, but that's the wrong word. It's so as they can spend their time passing on the faith to others. That's their primary duty. It's not just to be single and celibate and thinking that if they're married they'll be able to do a better job. If they had a family, they have to concentrate on the family to the exclusion of in some, not to the exclusion, but to not the wholehearted support of the Catholic faith, which is their duty and their job, and visit families in their homes and try to get them back to the Catholic faith and plant the seed.
Okay. What about permit marriage for diocesan priests?
No, because you see, these are all the kind of solutions that have been offered by the anti-Catholic media and some deluded people that think that this is the answer to everything. It's not the answer. The time-honoured way that has been practiced down the centuries is the way to go, and preach the Catholic faith properly. Preach for the business of reading the Bible. Now, when I was young, the Bible was not encouraged by Catholics. Now, latterly it was, but why didn't they do it them times? They should have done it, so as we'd have a proper foundation and might have saved ourselves a lot of trouble during life, because it just wasn't emphasised, these things. So emphasise that, and emphasise the reading of the Catholic Bible. And funny enough, the Protestants read the Bible, but they sometimes read a version of it that's applicable to their particular views of the Christian faith, which only occurred after the Reformation, when Martin Luther, a former Catholic priest, started objecting to various issues, and the same, they're still at it today, certain priests and all the rest of it, objecting to the age-old tenets where Jesus, our Saviour Jesus divine Saviour Jesus laid down. So just get back to that and stop trying to confuse the issues, and just practice what you're ordained for to do.
Okay. What about incardinate more former Catholic priests who left the church for marriage?
Well, you see, that would be a possibility, but they'd want to sort of lead a life that doesn't involve the practice of the marriage as they might have done. They'd want to abstain. You're supposed to be celibate, so even people that are married are not supposed to sort of seek pleasure from their wives or that, because it's the procreation of children is the primary duty. Show respect to your wife, and the wife show respect to her husband. I think that's something that's not as practiced as much as it was in the past. And really, the father is the head of the household, and that's not practiced now. It's all this equality stuff. And really, that was the duty of the father, to be the head of the household. And the wife was the head of the family, and the wife was the head of the household, and the two complemented one another.
Okay.
That's been lost because there's been a notion of marriage promoted it doesn't involve that type of behaviour, and this is why now the Catholic Church, a person getting married in the Catholic Church is obliged to do a 6 months course to prepare them for the sacrament of marriage, because it's a sacrament.
What about ordain more permanent deacons?
Well, that certainly would be something that should be done, because they have a role to play, a very important role, but it's not being promoted. It hasn't been promoted to my knowledge much in this country. I believe it's in other countries. As a matter of fact, on the programme EWTN, the Eternal Word Truth programme, which is a marvellous programme, well worth looking at for anyone that wants to seek truth. They've what's the question you just asked me there?
I said ordain more permanent deacons.
Yes, well, they have them on that, and there's one a deacon, and he has a programme examining the Catholic faith with a Dominican priest, and it's very interesting, on once a week. And I've seen that a few times. And this deacon is a coloured man, but by goodness, he's very well up. And it's you learn something from these programmes, and that's where you learn something from looking at programmes like that. You certainly won't learn nothing from looking at the sort of programmes that we have on the television on our own station. They don't promote any spiritual balance at all, or spiritual development of anyone. They have nothing that even smacks of any kind of religious beliefs by their presenters and by that station. And so much so that the Angelus, which is brings people to prayer, to say the Angelus, and when it rings at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock on the radio, but on the television they call it the People's. They don't know, they call it the Angelus, they call it the People's something or another, and then they show people doing all sorts of things other than saying a prayer or showing a church. It seems to be, seem to have a difficulty in showing a Catholic church, and they should be condemned for that. And the bishop should speak up about it and not be so silent.
And finally, we have employ more lay ministers.
Well, lay ministers, well, I don't think you could have such a thing, but certainly lay ministers give out Holy Communion. Mind you, I think they should be dressed in such a way as to show respect. Sometimes they go up with clothing that doesn't show any kind of respect. They should have some clothing on that would show respect by way of something around their neck, and wear proper clothing befitting the honour of bestowing the Holy Eucharist to people that are hopefully in a state of grace and receiving Holy Communion. They need to be dressed far better than they are. There seems to be no respect, I'm afraid, that I can see when people are doing the Eucharist. They're dressed in all sorts of garb, and not even wearing a collar and tie. And they should have something proper respect for what they're doing. Because heretofore, before this business of Eucharistic ministers and then to do readings, before that it was priest that gave out Holy Communion, and you had to kneel down and receive it on the tongue. That's done away with, so you're standing up and receiving it on the hand and all the rest of it. So I try to receive it on the tongue, but then if the lay person giving it to me, I take it on the hand. So it's the practice of the Catholic faith as it was done down the centuries. It needs to be reintroduced, and people that are lay people giving out the Holy Eucharist, it want to be dressed in such a manner as befitting that, and have something on that distinguishes them from the ordinary person that's in the congregation.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Oliver.